Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who is the one who always organizes group tickets, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, CJ Joel. I'm Sean Callanan, and yes, I am the one that organises the group tickets. Welcome to episode 397 of Sports Geek. This week, I chat with Dan McBride. He's the Senior Director, Championship Ticketing and Experiences at the United States Golf Association, otherwise known as the USGA. Stay tuned. Have a great chat with Dan on all things ticketing and some of the differences from pro sports to major events, especially in the world of golf. Really enjoyed this chat with Dan. If you're looking at fan experiences and also that customer journey piece, as well as, hey, selling those tickets, it's a really good pod. And stay tuned after the interview. I've got a few thoughts on the world of ticketing as they currently stand. You might be listening to this episode on our website, sportsgeekhq.com, or on your favourite podcast platform. What platform are you listening to? Are you listening to it on Spotify? Are you listening to it on Apple? Or you listen to it on the one that I recommend, Pocket Casts. I've been a long-time user of Pocket Casts, and I think it is the best podcast app out there. Thank you very much to the guys that have built it. I do love working with podcast listeners. If you find yourself nodding during these episodes and thinking, hey, that's a problem I would like to solve, can Sean help? I think I can. I would like to help. And this is a sign that we probably should be working together. Send me an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. As I said, love working with people who are in tune with the podcast, in tune with what we do. We love helping people grow their fan base, grow their digital fan base, and a lot of what we talk about here with Dan, make those commercial gains, whether they be ticketing, sponsorship, and working with your partners. So please reach out. The best time to reach out is always now. Enjoy my chat with Dan McBride from the USGA. Very happy to welcome Dan McBride. He's the Senior Director of Championship Ticketing and Experiences at the United States Golf Association, known as the USGA. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. I always start asking people how they got their start in sports. What about yourself? What was your first foray into the world of sports business?
Yeah, great question. I took a little bit of a circuitous path to get into the sports industry. I grew up playing soccer competitively, and then upon going to university, realized there was zero chance that I had the ability to actually play professionally. So how could I then marry my love of sports into like an actual career path?
Like a lot of the listeners, and a lot of my guests, like we're all failed athletes that have gone into the world of sports business.
Yeah, so I got a degree in finance and tried to parlay that into somehow getting into the industry. And after doing a couple years of regular corporate world work, I ended up getting an opportunity down in New Orleans, Louisiana, with the then New Orleans Hornets basketball team in the NBA. Entry-level position, just get in, learn, prove yourself, and kind of go from there. So I started as a business operations coordinator, and that was about 16 and a half years ago. So it's been a long, fun journey since then. But yeah, it was entry level, just grind it out and hit the ground running and prove that you can try to make it.
And was it a case of, you had a numbers and a finance background, and so you'd lived in the world of spreadsheets and data and those kind of things? Was that something that you, lent into and sort of looked at the roles, like you were in business operations and then ticketing, and then you sort of found your way into the analytics space at the Pelicans? Is that sort of something that you sort of doubled down or lent into your strengths?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started, I was working with the ticket operations department, and that was before analytics and CRM was even a known entity in the sports industry. So I literally sat in the office with the ticket operations department and learned the reporting side from the ticketing platform. And then from there, kind of layered on the additional numbers and skill set of working through Excel with financial modeling and all that fun stuff. And then it kind of like grew into the strategy and analytics type role. But it definitely started out with like the ticket operations team. I worked in the box office on game nights, getting my hands dirty and being the like front of house staff dealing with customers. Some fun, some not so happy when their tickets didn't show up. But that was kind of my foray into it.
And so I guess, again, like you said, an exciting time because a lot of sports teams were moving from, hey, paper tickets are getting sold. You walk up to will call to what does the data look like? We need the data of our fans, that analytics piece. So you're at the Pelicans and then you moved across in a similar role around that analytics space with the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, that's correct. So the gentleman who had been the president of the New Orleans Hornets became the president of the New Jersey Devils, and then recruited myself and a couple other people to come up to New Jersey to work in the NHL for the Devils in Prudential Center. And then for that opportunity, I ended up overseeing strategy and analytics for the entire organization from that perspective, focusing heavily on ticket pricing, ticket package development, and senior level and league level reporting.
And again, like as that sophistication and data and analysis came through, the stuff that you're talking about of looking at the product, changing the product pricing strategy, that time, and we're talking, 2013, 2017 range, was a real thing to say, hey, what levers can we pull to bring more people in or to drive revenue? What's the right price? Was that some of the stuff that you were doing at New Jersey, and like where a lot of teams were looking at that as a lever to pull?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when I was in New Jersey, we were one of the first organizations that actually did a consolidated like broker arrangement where we identified who the brokers were and then tried to like have a consistent strategy and just make it that much more impactful for the organization overall. And then additionally, we introduced a couple other quote unquote like innovative opportunities, knowing that season ticket packages it's a lot of games. Yeah. Like 41 regular season home games and then 2 or 3 preseason games. Like it's a lot for a fan. So we were the first ones in the NHL to do a flex membership model where based on your commitment and spend, you had access to premier pricing across all of the different tiered games and tiered access into which seats you could get. So obviously the more you spend, the better their discounted rate over the course of time, as well as your seat availability.
Yeah, I mean, that was it's a really interesting space, and you can't do that. Like those decisions were being made blind previous to that to go, oh, we're changing our pricing or we're putting out a new product without having that data. But once you had the data to go, oh, we do know, these fans, this segment of fans will spend more money or do want a better experience but don't have access to it. I think that's been where it's been exciting and, it continues to develop. From the New Jersey Devils, you went to the City Football Group, which, going from 2 US teams to City Football Group, which is obviously in New York, but then also had other, Manchester City. What was it like working with the City Football Group?
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. That was a good part of my career where I was based in Manhattan in the offices with New York City FC of MLS. And when I was like City Football Group has continued to grow and expand. The time while I was there, we had there was a controlling operational interest in 4 of the clubs. And those were the clubs that I dealt with. I was like an internal consultant from a ticketing strategy perspective. So about half of my time was spent focusing on New York City FC because that was a huge opportunity because obviously New York City's massive market, trying to penetrate that with everything else going on around the city, not only just from a sporting perspective, but also just from live entertainment, concerts, whatever. There was a huge opportunity there. So that was about half of my time. Then I was traveling and working with all the other clubs internationally. So I spent about 25% of my time with Manchester City, primarily focusing on their premium inventory from a single match perspective, and helping with some pricing and revenue optimization. And then the remaining 25% of my time was split between 2 of the smaller clubs, smaller, quote unquote, by name stature, but still super successful. One being in La Liga, Girona FC, who I'm sure you guys have seen is now playing in the Champions League after a super successful campaign last year, which is great to see. And then Melbourne City FC and in the A-League down in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's some of the differences? Like you've been able to go from different sports in different markets, but then getting that international feel of, the US ticketing and hospitality and premium space compared to to the UK and even Australia, like some of the things that are culturally different or the way that it's done. Was there a little bit of both adjustment for you to learn that new market, but then also realize, oh, this actually works in New York, this will work in the UK or this will work in Melbourne?
Yeah, exactly right. So while I was there, I essentially had a monthly call with senior leadership from all of the clubs, as well as CFG umbrella organization, where we would talk through essentially what's happening in each of the different markets. Are there like sharing opportunities of best practices? Can we take something that's working in New York City and somehow apply it in Melbourne? But also being very cognizant of the cultural differences. So part of what the role was getting to know the markets and the differences culturally, because it's not a cookie cutter approach. Like you can't take something in New York and just drop it into Manchester and expect it to work, and vice versa across all of the clubs. So it's like, okay, how can we take this opportunity that we found success somewhere, twist it, spin it, slice it, rework it so that it fits within the right cultural perspective and in that local market, and kind of run with it. I would say there were actually a couple of things that we did launch that were kind of interesting. One of them being it was an inside sales team. It's obviously super popular in traditional sports here in North America. It had been introduced right as I was getting on the ground running with Manchester. And over the course of time, while I was there, we actually were able to essentially prove the case and show the value that it could bring, and ended up hiring 2 sales reps in Girona and 1 sales rep in Melbourne. So it was one of those things where it's just like, okay, here's an opportunity. Let's do the case study. Let's make sure that we're proving that there's value to be added here, because like there's obviously risk when you're adding headcount from a capital perspective. So we have to make sure we can justify that there is going to be a return on the investment. And thankfully we were able to prove that. And it was successful. The one other thing that I would say that was a kind of a cool initiative that I enjoyed was Black Friday deals, right? That's super popular in the US and in North America, and it started getting traction globally. So we did a bunch of research and was just like, we hadn't been participating in Black Friday offers with some of the other clubs. So I was just like, guys, like we're talking like billions of dollars being spent on these days globally now. Like we need to do something. So we kind of went back and forth. Each of the individual clubs like did a tailored offer for each one, put it out in market. Some were more successful than others. But one of the cool things was, and I would say this specifically about Melbourne, is while the Black Friday offer was not super successful from a revenue generation perspective, it actually was a great learning opportunity, because Boxing Day down there is super popular. So we took the learnings from that and applied it for a Boxing Day offer, and they killed it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It must have been really the opportunities to be able to test in different markets, because, with ticketing, if you apply a change, might be a small one, it might be a price one, it might be a product one. There's always the fan feedback and how it gets rolled out and how it gets communicated, how it gets marketed, and what the reaction is. And to be, and normally if you're with one team, you've got 1 or 2 of these opportunities. Whereas when if you've got the opportunity of working with multiple teams in multiple markets, you can sort of take those learnings and lessons and apply them. So it must have been advantageous to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very, very cool opportunity to test and trial things, and having the freedom and ability to do that, because that's the one thing I will say about the organization was they were very like forward facing on pushing the envelope and trying to test to see if things can work and will make a difference. So
one more gig that I want to talk about before we get into your work currently at the USGA was working in ticketing and strategy around Activation Blizzard, when they were looking to have esports events in venues and move to that in real life. It was the trajectory of esports was up and going to the right, and everyone was trying to do different things. It hit some difficulties, but what was your experience like? Try to bring the sports experience into the world of esports.
Yeah, so that was a really fascinating opportunity as well. So I will tell you right now, I am not a gamer. by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm fascinated by the level of passion that gamers have in following their respective game, as well as players on YouTube channels and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what I was doing with Activision Blizzard Esports, I was helping them with the launch of the Call of Duty League, and they already had launched the Overwatch League. So I was essentially, once again, like the internal consultant from a league level on ticketing strategy, on like essentially pricing out and scaling a building. How many different price points do you have? Where do you put like a club seat? Like knowing where like camera angles are for your shots. So knowing if you want those seats filled, so you want to make sure that it's the right people in those specific locations, and then building in the right price breaks, and setting your right like revenue targets. Because that was one of the things that they brought me in for, is because most of those organizations were relatively flat, didn't have a ton of bandwidth from a human capital perspective, and most of the people that were already in the organization didn't have a background in ticketing. So
yep.
I was kind of like, from that perspective, very just working as a liaison and consultant with the individual clubs, but also helping the league, because they own and operate the tentpole events. So like the championship events, the Activision Blizzard was the one operating that. So I helped build out the pricing strategy and the go-to-market strategy from an inventory management and pricing perspective to try to obviously maximize the revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And, at the same time, I owned an esports team in the League of Legends space, and the same, like yourself, not a gamer, but trying to bring, I guess, that sports experience without the data of, hey, this is how people have previously come to events, because they weren't going to events. It was like, and the bit that I found, I guess, difficult in the space is they hadn't had that history and that knowledge of, this is how you market an event and this is how you communicate to fans to come to an event. So it made it really hard to, get them to an event when they'd previously been, not like a traditional sports fan. They'd consumed their sport for free on Twitch or on YouTube. And so that transactional nature with, a league, other than buying the game and playing the game, wasn't quite there. So, and then obviously things like COVID hit and all the things went back online, and it hasn't quite, and it sort of had a bit of a reset moment. But I'm always interested in talking to people like myself and you that come from sports and tried to apply sports business practice to esports when it was still relatively new.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always said was, we have to understand and know that it's not traditional sports. They're looking at it from a traditional sports perspective, but the biggest thing is like, you have to be like flexible and nimble, because like people will flip very quickly. Particularly in the digital age where we are right now. So it's like making sure that you know your market and that you're activating in the channels that are going to reach who your target audiences are, and make sure that you're tracking all of that, because like it's going to change rapidly.
Yeah. And the esports space was still relatively new from an esports point of view on what those channels are and, how you would market on those channels. And, places like Twitch didn't, there wasn't a lot of marketing of channels, whereas we do see that on the traditional social channel. So it did come with its issues. You're now at the USGA. Tell us a little bit about the USGA and what your role is there now.
Yeah, no, so appreciate that. So United States Golf Association, my role, I've now been here for about a little over 3.5 years. And my role and function are from a ticketing perspective. I kind of build out and manage all of our ticket pricing and packaging, product development, and work hand in hand with our marketing team for our go-to-market strategy, and how we're rolling out our phased ticket distribution across all of our ticketed championships. And with the USGA, we operate 15 championships every single year, of which we only commercialize via ticketing 5, sometimes 6, depending upon the year. So I'm working with multiple teams in multiple markets every single year, because that's one of the very cool things about the role, because I get to go work and learn about a new market in the US at least 5 different times every single year. So everything is constantly learning, growing, testing. It's a lot of fun, and it's a really good group of people.
So I've spoken to people in the golf landscape and also in that tournament landscape. It's very different from the traditional sports of, like you said before, 41 home games to sell out of, NBA and NHL, that kind of thing, or less for some sports. Is it a different way from a marketing point of view? Because it is really hyper local, but then you've also got that tourism element of you want people to be flying in for the tournament. Is there some nuances that are particular to what you do at USGA?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like you're spot on where because we change locations every single year, you can't build like baseline historical data and just like rinse and repeat. Just doesn't work. Just won't work. So we have a very like flexible approach in how we do analysis. So like we do internal analysis, we work with outside vendors for market research and feasibility studies so that we can get a proper scope and scale of the size of the market that we're going into, so we can properly set expectations from a ticket sales perspective. So it's very, very much a fluid and constantly evolving like analysis and change and update. And then we like go to market strategy, build out how we're going to do it. And we build out years in advance. Like some of our championships have already been announced up to like 2050. I think there's one of the US Opens that's already been announced.
Oh, wow.
So we're like from a host site, like we're very far out in that. And then we get hyper focused on a couple years, up to 5 years out is where we start like getting into the weeds, but super hyper focused on like 2-year increments and then out to about 5, knowing that we need to be flexible because this is going to be 6 months from now is probably going to be different than it is 16 months from now. So kind of like getting ahead and learning as much as we can, but then always like continuing to maintain all of that growth and learning from a data capture perspective that can then enhance and optimize how we're going to market.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask. So there's similarities to your work at City Football Group in that you had multiple teams with multiple venues. Do you sort of have a playbook that says, we're going into a new market and it's 2 years, 3 years, and 15 years in some instances, and start saying, what does our data capture piece, what does our visibility and brand awareness piece, which might be more the marketing team, but you're like, hey guys, I need a little bit of that data. How are we getting some of that data? And it's not like you can do a pre-registration for tickets in 5 years. Like, do you have a playbook that you're sort of dropping in market by market as they are either coming down the in the pipeline for the future?
Yeah, so we do have a base level playbook that we kind of from a strategy and a timing perspective, and that's obviously based off of historicals. But knowing where we are, we tend to be flexible on what we go with when we go with it, depending upon the nuance associated with each individual market. But yeah, we have a baseline structure that we just like, okay, here's the framework, right? We know we need to do this, and this. How can we apply it into each of these specific markets, knowing that, like, okay, the Women's Open next year in 2025 is at Erin Hills. Erin Hills closes down for the season because it gets really cold outside of Milwaukee sooner than it does. Like, you can golf year round in Florida. You can't really do that out in Wisconsin. So we had to tailor our strategy from a ticket launch perspective, knowing that the club was going to be closed for 3-4 months, maybe 5 months throughout the course of the winter. So there's not going to be top of mind recognition because people aren't going to be out there playing. So like, how can we make sure that we build our marketing campaigns to not get totally lost in the shuffle, but make sure we're also maximizing our spend during like the trough time in the cycle when there's going to be when we expect there to be less sales, and make sure that we're maximizing our spend on that so that we're getting the greatest return that we can and selling the most tickets and meeting our fans where they want to be met, when they want to be spoken with, and provide them with an offer that will resonate with them, that they will want to actually purchase and then come attend.
Yep. And in your role, it says ticketing and experiences. Is the experiences side the hospitality and the premium side of the business that you're sort of looking at selling that piece out?
So it's more involved with just the fan experience and working with a marketing team and the on-site experience. So like we do have premium ticket products. We also do have a separate corporate hospitality program that is managed by somebody else. But we work hand in hand on a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of crossover. And that's one of the things that's kind of happening within the industry. Like from a trend perspective, you're seeing a lot more of like people still want super high-end experiences and they're willing to pay for it, but they want them in smaller increments. Like you're starting to see that trend of like small high-end groups as opposed to like your big 200 or 100 person tents. Now, don't get me wrong, like there are still some of those out there, but you're seeing a lot more super smaller high-end experiences. And how do we like work together to make sure that we're maximizing the opportunity and providing those right products and selling them at the right price point that will resonate and drive revenue for the organization and provide the right fan experience, because the name of the game is to create memories and to get people to want to come back to another event. One of the coolest things that from my experience thus far is getting to see like multiple generations of a family experience one of our championships. And like you can see like, I'll just use like Father's Day is Championship Sunday for the US Open. Yeah. So like you can see multiple generations, like grandfather, father, and then grandson, like all there making memories. And like that is like one of the things that resonates that like I really enjoy about the job. Like that hits the feel spot and gives me joy in what we do. And
is that like, do you take that, is that working hand in hand with marketing and how the event is built to then tie that back to the ticket to say, hey, I'm building this ticket for this family, for this father, son to be going, but knowing that it's just not a transaction that, selling the ticket is the starting point, but knowing that they're going to have this experience, the way they enter the course, where they stand, how they'll experience it is just as vital, even more vital than just saying, here it is, and this is the price, and this is the button you need to click once you see my ad.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's all about building the right benefits and experiences that are included in whatever ticket product that you're trying to put together, and identifying who your target audience is and what they're truly getting, or what they really want in all reality, what that they want that experience to be like, and how much they're willing to pay for it. And that's where the research and data comes into play. And like constantly doing like surveys and research and like that is extremely important. Because as I said earlier, like it's changing, it's ever changing. And I think it's only going to continue to change even more rapidly than it currently is with the invention, like with the integrations with some like AI and machine learning. Like it's going to continue to evolve at such a rapid pace. Like you have to stay on top of it and be flexible and nimble and adjust your product offerings and the benefits included to what will resonate and will get people to want to purchase and to create that experience that they will remember for a lifetime.
So you touched on machine learning and AI and some of these, I guess, tech opportunities. How do you stay on top of things and then decide what to cherry pick and what to apply? And how would you, how do you go about, using something like that or rolling something like that out?
Yeah, great question. So for me, it's staying up to speed with what's going on in the industry, attending conferences, whether they're in person or virtual conferences, networking, like understanding and taking some cold calls from people that are just like, hey, I have this opportunity that I think would be of interest. Like we're doing this as it's related to like machine learning, and I think it might be impactful for your business. So being open and willing to hear people out is very helpful, because that's kind of one of the things that like you can kind of like, maybe if you just get one tidbit of information that then is just like the tip of the iceberg that will cascade down into something else that could become something super fruitful.
And then I've been asking a lot of people recently what their current tech stack looks like. What does your tech stack look like from a ticketing and data point of view?
Yeah, so we have our ticketing platform. We work with Axis, and they have essentially a data warehouse, and we get to grab that data out, and we use Tableau as our data visualization tool, which I think a lot of organizations do at this point in time. And then I also love going back to my base roots and doing some slicing and dicing and formulas in Excel. because like we can pull data out of the platform system and then visualize it and slice it however we need to and take different cuts from there. And then obviously feed everything into our email marketing campaign program and CRM and do all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, I think it's the bit that I find exciting in that space. And I saw a startup here in Melbourne that effectively pitched themselves as Canva for data analysis. So effectively you just take some data and throw it at this LLM, and then you can be querying it, giving it questions or saying, what graph should I be showing? So it's sort of trying to jump past and sort of do things that Tableau does, but also some of the stuff that I was playing around with was just the analysis of longer form text, like all of the feedback you're getting, or all the entries or from a competition, you're able to get sentiment and let it pull out some data. So it's those kind of things, whether they be add-on tools or that get added to your current tool set, that I think is an exciting development.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I think that space within the industry is about to explode. Like obviously there's the buzzword, like AI is the buzzword right now. Yeah. But I do think there are some significant opportunities where it can make a huge impact. And I think some of the impact, it might not necessarily be revenue generation. It might actually be cost savings. Yeah. And it still makes a difference to the bottom line.
Yeah. And it's a cost saving and efficiency, not, hey, this is going to replace somebody. Because it's still a tool. Like you still have to, someone has to be at the control of it and to do it. But if it enables you to do your analysis of a pre-sale quicker, to know what adjustments to make, that's where the advantages will be coming.
Absolutely. And I think making that as something as simple as being able to speak and ask the question, like I think audio driven like AI that's to me is where like the game changer is really going to be.
Yeah, and I think the other piece in the ticketing space is like how it can potentially do some customer support and do that first line and not be as clunky as maybe the early chatbots have been, where people know that they're talking to a bot, but to get people to the right place sooner and going back to that fan experience piece, I think there's something there. You talked earlier about innovation and different things that you have done in the past, whether it be the flex tickets you talked about earlier, or going on sale different ways. Is there particular ticketing and fan experience trends that have you excited that you're either planning to doing or looking at?
Yeah, I think the more we get into the space where we're incorporating the entire door-to-door experience within, like, streamline it, because I think as technology has gotten better, particularly from like a TV perspective, it's a lot easier to just stay at home and watch a game as opposed to going on site. Like, okay, well, I need to go park. What's the weather? All of this other stuff. Like, how long am I going to have to wait in line? I don't know the cost of food. All of these other things that can be simply streamlined and answered quickly and efficiently, and make that door-to-door experience seamless so that it's a no-brainer that, like, no, I want to be on site to watch this live. Don't get me wrong. It's cool watching it on TV in the background, but like to actually feel the passion and the excitement, like you need to make sure that is still what is like the primary focus, and then streamline the level of efficiency for every other potential roadblock or stumbling point along the path that can impair that experience. And for us, a lot of that is like ingress, egress, because like some of our championships, you're talking about 35, 40,000 people going through a couple different gates. And like, we want their initial experience on site and the last experience of them seeing us when they're walking out to be a positive one. So making sure that we're super clean and efficient from that perspective is like really, really important to us. And from a tech innovation perspective, this year we actually rolled out for the first time some facial recognition software for re-entry, and that was the first time that that had been done in the golf space. So we partnered with Wicket, who now has a bunch of clients also with the NFL. But we were their first foray into golf this past year, and it was like seamless transition for re-entry, from exit to re-entry. It it was amazing. It was great. So we're actually looking at probably going to expand the program in the coming years, hopefully.
I mean, that's a really good, way also to introduce it, because I would imagine rolling that out for entry is a big education piece, and especially you're not in the same space as the team where you're always going to Prudential Centre or you're always going to the same venue, where it's like, and a lot of the teams have integrated their ticketing experience into their app and tried to do that from home to stadium. But for you, because you're in multiple places, you don't have that relationship with the fan ongoing. So you must have a lot of single time or first time or only time that they go is when it's in market.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So we have a very finite window within which we can actually have a direct impact with our fans. One of the interesting things you talk about, like data analysis, is we also, and I think this kind of speaks highly of the experience that our team, that our ops team builds out, and that our marketing team and on-site team puts together. And not to mention, obviously, the golfers are kind of amazing. The over-indexing of fans purchasing from the previous year's market is one of the actual not funny, but it's one of the really fascinating data pieces that we have. So I just call it latent loyalty, where we have people that come on site for the first time just because we're in their market and they want to check it out. And then they're like, oh, we had a great time. And they buy the next year and are willing to travel sometimes across the country, because we went from Los Angeles all the way to Pinehurst, North Carolina between 23 and 24. So we noticed specifically between 22 and 23 for the U.S. Open. So the 22 U.S. Open was at the Country Club just outside of Boston in Brookline. Then 23 was at the Los Angeles Country Club in L.A. And we significantly over-indexed in ticket buyers from the Boston market for L.A. than we would have expected. So it was just kind of interesting. And that's something that is going to be unique to us or other events that just constantly move. But that was just kind of an interesting piece. So I look at that as okay, from an ops and experiential perspective, you did a great job because people want to come back and they're willing to travel now to go to it. But then I'm also thinking about it from a sales perspective, being okay, we need to make sure that we're also spending marketing in the previous market because they're still willing to buy, and the data shows that.
Yeah, so it's just another page in your playbook. It's let's remarket to them. And then the other pieces of those, I love those hidden nuggets. And again, you're a data geek, and you can then go to your commercial team and say, oh, we've got a real, here's another piece for our travel experiences team, and showing, how many people bring into market, and the revenue generated and brought into market. So is that something that you then, send to your commercial team or and to circulate that kind of data find? Because it's great for you from a ticketing point of view, and you can add it to your marketing, but there potentially is other parts of the department, whether it be, the hospitality people might realize the same thing and that kind of stuff. Is that something that, you circulate within the business?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we work hand in hand with the corporate hospitality program, as well as with our experiences and travel package provider group. So it's definitely something that we like to get in touch with and work hand in hand, and okay, how can we maximize the opportunity? What are you seeing? What are we seeing? Where are there opportunities that what can we add an experience here in this spot? Is there space to do that? Not sure. Let's see if we can work something out to figure out a way to make it happen. Yes, 100%. Those lines of communication are extremely important in terms of trying to optimize revenue. So for sure, definitely.
I want to ask you, you had experience in finance and started in the ticketing space of sales, and like you said, worked in the front office. What do you look for in staff that when you're recruiting them for your team to work in the world of ticketing and analytics? What are the qualities and experience that you're looking for, or advice you would give someone that wants to work in that space?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The one thing that I always go back to, if there is one trait or characteristic in a potential teammate, it's intellectual curiosity. The way that I look at things is it's character and intellectual curiosity. You need to have integrity, and I can trust you to do whatever you say you're going to do. and I want you to be interested in learning. We can teach the skill set. That's not that in all reality, it's great to have the skill set, but you can be taught that. It's really about the intellectual curiosity and desire to want to learn. That I find is probably been the most important characteristic trait, and that kind of goes hand in hand with kind of like the character and having grit in all reality, because we do work some crazy hours. Like when we're on site at a championship, it's very early mornings because we have to be on site before any fans are, and it's very late nights because we have to get all the fans out before we can leave also. So you have to have that grit also, that you're willing to put in the hard work and effort. But yeah, as I was saying, intellectual curiosity and the desire to learn is the number one thing from my perspective.
Especially in a field like we've said, and if you were to list all the different CRMs and all the different data tools that you've used, it's like, well, they don't all come with a training course. Here it is. It's sort of like the last one, slightly different, and the data comes in a different way, and you just have to, like you said, learn it, understand how to optimize it. So yeah, that ability to learn is vital, and then the fact that also the bit of I find like knowing what your fan is going through. So seeing them turn up, being curious as much as the data, but also what's the experience like? Where are people falling over? That curiosity can also be in, how you test things. Oh, we're rolling it out. Did anyone click on the link and see where it went? And does it do that kind of stuff? Like that's super important in the tech space. But ticketing, when you're trying to chase them all the way down the funnel, and there's all of these things like cookies being removed and Meta taking away a bunch of things you can track, like it's getting harder. So you just have to be more thorough.
Yeah, exactly right. And you're spot on. It's just like, where can you identify where people are falling off in the funnel? And if you can identify why they're falling off and fix it. And one of the things that like I always go back to is like the less clicks required to get to a purchase, the better, right? I think everybody knows and believes that, but you got to provide the right amount of information in the least amount of clicks required. Absolutely.
And like I discussed recently, sweating that small stuff, like, what copy is working, what platform is working, and, and asking, having that curiosity, why? Like, why? Oh, what demographic? Oh, cool. That demographic is really drawn to that creative and we're getting sales. Well, let's, push our chips in with that and we'll start tackling something else. But you don't get that if you're just turning it on and waiting for a report. If you don't have that curiosity, you won't get those answers.
Yep, absolutely. And that goes hand in hand with like the always test. Like you constantly be testing. Like, okay, which images are getting better click rates, even if they're not converting? Is it getting better clicks because it's intriguing? Okay, great. So let's focus more on those types of images. So like player images tend to do better than static course images. Like, okay, so how do we lean into that appropriately at the right time, so that we can actually drive quicker conversions?
Absolutely. Dan, I really do appreciate it. I want to get to the Sports Geek Closing 5. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I do. I was extremely fortunate growing up in New Jersey as a child, and I was able to attend the 1994 World Cup quarterfinals. Wow. When Germany lost to Bulgaria, got shocked by Bulgaria in the quarterfinals at old Giant Stadium. So that was my first real like sports experience, and I was hooked ever since.
Amazing. You would have been to a lot of sports events in your time. Do you have a favorite food or a food memory or a go-to food at a sports event?
So yeah. So my wife would kill me if I gave a different answer. So I'm going to make sure I keep my spot in line. Tiger nachos at LSU Stadium, particularly on a Saturday night. It's pretty delicious.
Awesome work. What's the first app you open in the morning?
That would actually be Wordle. I'm a big fan of Wordle, and it kind of like kickstarts my brain for the day to get it moving. So yeah, it's Wordle, and then probably ESPN after that.
Yeah, I mean that gamification and keeping that streak. I do find interesting. Now that LinkedIn has embedded games into LinkedIn to try to bring the engagement back, and the same thing. It's like, hey, keep that streak alive, keep that streak alive. So is there someone that you follow? It might be an author, it might be someone you follow on social media, it might be a colleague that the podcast listeners should give a follow to, and why?
I would say Simon Sinek. He is a great thought leader, particularly on leadership and how to manage and grow, both personally and professionally. So I'm a big fan of his.
Absolutely. And lastly, and you can answer this personally, and then maybe put your ticket sales hat on. What social media platform is your MVP?
I probably have to say LinkedIn. From a business perspective, LinkedIn for sure. Personally, I'm not huge into social media overall, but I use like X, Twitter for real time information, and then keeping track with friends would be Facebook. But I would still say like LinkedIn has to be the MVP across the board.
And then from a ticket sales, like a ticket sales point of view, and the particular, I guess, ad platforms, is there one that over indexes for what you're doing at USGA?
At this current point in time, I would say Instagram has been the most successful from a ticket sales perspective, which I guess is not all too surprising, but yeah.
I mean, it's got the most sophisticated ad product. It keeps changing, and every time you log in, there's something different. And like we said before, there's more and more restrictions. But X and TikTok have copied it in some form or another. But yeah, Meta seems to be the way that works the best. But also, it depends on the demographic. And if you've got a slightly older demographic, then Meta and Instagram is always going to be a winner.
Indeed.
What is the best way for listeners of this podcast who had a listen and might work in ticketing or across sports business and want to say thank you? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
I would actually say LinkedIn. Just look me up, Dan McBride, United States Golf Association. Happy to connect and chat with people. If you got any cool ideas or things that you guys are working on, I'm happy to take a call and listen and see if there's an opportunity to learn and grow and develop.
Well, thank you very much. We'll put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. Dan, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Looking to help your digital or sponsorship team? Book in for a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan to help your team level up. Book now at sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain.
Thanks again to Dan McBride. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. I will tag him on the post. Please reach out, say thank you, comment on the post, say thanks to Dan for sharing his time, which you all do on the posts and on the socials every time. I really do appreciate when podcast listeners reach out and thank the guests. And I'm very appreciative of the time they give. You can find all the links to things that we discussed, including Dan's LinkedIn, at sportsgeekhq.com/397. I'm recording this a few days after the Australian Grand Prix. Tickets went on sale, and I thought it'd be a good time to talk about it because it was a disaster. Just to take you through it, and I will share some links in the show notes of some really good articles that sort of did a bit of a deep dive. I thought the hospitality pre-sale a few weeks ago was bad, as I went to buy a couple of tickets to see the Grand Prix in March. It kept falling over when I was trying to buy 2 tickets and there was 3 tickets available because it wouldn't leave one seat open. So I had to buy 3 tickets to get those 3 seats. So forgetting that logic that was sitting there, it then fell over. When I did secure the tickets, it fell over because the type form that was asking me if I had allergies, which really did not need to be asked at this time, could not handle the load. So have all the load balancing on all your tech, but then insert a piece of tech that's not load balanced, it's going to fall over. It's quite frustrating as a geek to see these tech fails happening more often than they should. They just shouldn't happen. It's 2024, people. But that was the pre-sale. I thought that was bad. Then the tickets went on sale to the general public. There is obviously high demand thanks to largely Drive to Survive that has grown the fan base. But the on-sale was a complete disaster. Firstly, the on-sale was delayed by 24 hours due to a third-party outage. I guess these things can't be avoided, but it did not set the scene very well because then when it was all turned on the next day, it was turned on with the new in-demand pricing module turned on, which makes no sense to me, turning on the in-demand pricing module when you're providing the most demand as possible by sending everybody to your site to buy tickets at the same time. When you know you've got a large list and a very high demand, you don't need an in-demand pricing module to be installed, because what happened was people would go in, they waited in a queue, they finally found out if they got tickets, and then they were shocked to see that the pricing that they thought they were going to buy those tickets was jumping by $100 or $150 or some amount every time, which is very tough considering we're going through a cost of living crisis, to then say, oh, these tickets might go up in price. You have the data. If you have the data and you know there's demand, then just put the prices up. Tell the public this is what the prices are because we've got demand. That's what supply and demand works. I don't have a problem with the prices going up. What I have a problem with is the prices going up during a pre-ballot, pre-sale. This is the first time they're going on sale. The prices shouldn't be moving at that point. And for me, the poor piece is these statements that get made by sports executives, either in the press or at conferences, saying the fans are the most important thing to us. And then we deliver ticketing platforms and ticketing experiences that are the exact opposite of that. If we're going to walk the walk and say the fans are super important, then we need to fix these things. You can't say the fans are the most important thing to us and then roll out a program like that. So for mine, it was very poor from both the Australian Grand Prix that spec'd it all up and said this is what we want, and then Ticketmaster as their ticketing and tech provider to deliver such a terrible experience to fans. And don't, like I said, you don't need to hide behind fancy tech of saying the price, in-demand pricing module was turned on. If you know that you've got a large database and large demand, then set the prices and deal with the PR accordingly. But I really do feel for the fans that missed out, the poor team on the frontline support from a socials point of view that got copped an absolute barrage when these things shouldn't be happening in 2024. And so, I think, both Ticketmaster and Australian Grand Prix did F1 fans a large disservice in the way that they implemented their ticketing strategy and their launch strategy. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. I mean, it's not just a Melbourne problem. It's not just a Grand Prix problem. The way that fans are being served from a ticketing point of view, and we've seen the issues that the Taylor Swift fans had, and we're seeing the same complaints for the Oasis tickets. So it's not new. What's the solution, and how can you work with it, and how you can solve it? It's still a tough one. I'd love to try to help more people solve this issue. And so if you're serious about engaging your fans, you really got to start looking at what your fan ticketing journey looks like. What can you do with your partner, whether it be ticketing and tech, to make sure it's right? What testing are you doing to make sure it works? I'd love to help. Sean at sportsgeekhq.com is how you can find me. Hopefully you did get tickets to the Grand Prix if you were trying to get them. And until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Do you get Sports Geek news? Sean Callanan analyzes the latest sports business articles for you weekly. Sign up at sportsgeekhq.com. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.